Hi, I'm Rebecca and I'm from Psych Tips, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how you can stop obsessing about your ex. It's totally normal to obsess about your ex, especially if you weren't the one that was broken up with. But what we know is it can be a bit of a waste of time. And actually, if you continually think about someone who's probably not spending the time thinking about you, you're just going to be wasting your time and not able to move on with the things that you enjoy in life and the things that you find fulfilling. I'm going to talk to you about 5 strategies you can put in place to start feeling better and get the amount of time you're spending thinking about your ex down a lot. Right, point number 1 is ditch the internet stalking. Easier said than done, I know. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're going to be well into the realms of doing lots of internet stalking, looking on LinkedIn, signing in with other friends' accounts on Facebook, on Instagram, on Snapchat. If you've been blocked by your ex, you're going to be looking at their friends, looking at their distant family members. It's a waste of time. Very rarely are you going to get a bit of information where you think, oh, that was well worth the 16, 17, 18, 50 hours that I've spent looking to try and find this bit of information. It doesn't serve you well. So what can you do to stop it? If you're in the realms of continually Googling your ex's name, you need to set yourself a limit of how many times is a maximum that you should be doing that in a day. If you're doing it, say 50, 60, 70, 100 times in a day, then I would suggest reducing it by maybe 10%, by 20%. We're looking for gradual declines in what you're doing. If you're on WhatsApp and you're looking multiple times an hour at when your ex is online, then maybe you can try and change it to once an hour. Maybe you can then, once you've achieved once an hour, maybe you can then move it to once every 2 hours. These are all ideal goals. You can put a blanket ban on logging in with different friends' accounts. That can just be a total ban from the very start. That should be really easy to do. And you can tell your friends what you're doing so they can try and help make sure that you are staying on track and that you are gradually reducing. It can even help to keep a record because it's motivating to see the numbers going down. It might be difficult at the start, but when you start seeing progress being made, you're going to feel enthused. You're going to feel better and more motivated to keep on track and keep the reducing. If you slip and you end up having a day where you go completely obsessive and, I don't know, waste a whole Sunday where you're obsessing about them and doing lots of Googling, okay, but get back on track quickly. Point number 2 is try and engage in some form of distraction. Now, again, I know that sounds really basic, and if you could, you probably would be. But if you're able to engage in something distracting that 1, you enjoy, and that 2, is goal orientated, the more compelled you're probably going to be to do it. So if you've got a plan of exercising a certain amount of times a week, that's a goal, then you need to try and stick with that. If there's a charity that you like doing work for every so often, then you need to try and work towards doing that. If there's a personal project, maybe you want to take up more journaling, maybe you want to make a commitment to make more friends, maybe you want to have a commitment to be a bit more cultured and go and learn new things. Maybe you want to have a commitment to have a bit more you time where you can sit, watch television, read something, I don't know, listen to an online lecture that you don't know on a subject you don't know much about. Then do those things. They're distracting, but they're also working towards your personal goals. And hopefully a lot of them are things that you're going to find fun. So distract yourself, because even if you reduce the amount of time you're obsessing about your ex by 2 minutes a day, you've clawed back 15 minutes a week on something that is more productive. Okay? So focus on the small incremental progress that you're making. It's also really satisfying when you're working towards goals to be able to think, yeah, tick, I've done that really well. I don't know, did my first step of Couch to 5K today, or yeah, I read the first chapter of a book that I've wanted to read in ages, or oh, I listened to a TED Talk and I learned something new today. So distraction, but do things you find enjoyable and that are goal orientated. Number 3 is ditch the mentionitis. What's mentionitis? Well, mentionitis is where you keep on mentioning your ex's name. You go over and over the same ground. Your friends have heard it before. You've heard yourself talking about it before. Ditch mentioning their name. And that means having a rule that when you go out, when you spend time with your friends, you are not to mention your ex's name. Neither are you to go on a fishing expedition to try and find out what it is they're up to. And a really good tip, sort of an add-on tip, is tell your friends again what you're doing, because that means they'll be able to close the conversation down as soon as you start talking about your ex. I know that you might really feel compelled to do that, but actually it's just not a healthy thing for you to be doing. And as I said at the start, it's a bit of a waste of time. If you really feel an urge to talk, then fine. Allocate a particular conversation you're going to have with a friend to talk about your feelings and get them out. But as a general rule, you shouldn't continually be talking about your ex when you're with your friends. Point number 4. Allocate obsessive time. What's obsessive time? Well, obsessive time is where you set yourself goals for at what point in the day you will allow yourself to think about your ex. So you might say, right, at 9 a.m. I will give myself 15 minutes. And then at 12 o'clock, I will give myself half an hour. And then at 7 p.m, I'll give myself 45 minutes. And during those breaks, I'm able to completely obsess about my ex and think about them and wonder what they're doing. But in between those times, your brain will, of course, want to obsess about your ex, but the idea is you tell yourself, no, I will be able to, but in 2 hours' time, in 3 hours' time, in 4 hours' time, however long it is. Initially, it's not going to reduce the amount of time you're spending thinking about your ex, because, of course, your brain is going to constantly bombard you with a desire to think about them. But the more you can tell yourself, I really want to think about them, but I'm not going to for another hour, I'm not going to for another 2 hours, the more your brain starts learning that just because I want to think about them right now, I don't have to. So allocate obsessive time dependent on how much you're thinking about them. If you're not thinking about them too much, then maybe 2, 3, 15 minute slots a day is enough. If you're spending 22 hours a day thinking about them, then maybe you need to allocate 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes an hour to thinking about them. Point number 5, don't idealise them. Of course, in the relationship, there would have been good points about your ex, I'm sure. And there would have also been bad points as well. But if you constantly think about how amazing they are and how wonderful everything they did was, you're giving yourself a false impression of the relationship. So each time you find yourself idealising them and thinking about how amazing the relationship was, remind yourself of the reasons why it finished. Remind yourself of the moments where you maybe had a bit of an amber flag. Maybe you even had a red flag and you thought, I shouldn't be here. And remind yourself of those bits, because the more you idealise, the more you create that sort of fantasy obsession with how wonderful it was. And the reality is, if it ended, it probably wasn't wonderful for at least one of you. Try and employ those tips, all 5 of them, and I assure you, bit by bit, you will start clawing back the hours in your day and start living a far more fulfilling existence. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will give you more tips about how to use psychology to improve your day-to-day life.